Regular average, you have like 5,
Yes.
but then you have the,
We've had meetings with people, that committee wouldn't spill out all the issues.
That's not fair.
It looks like it is 8:30, right? So I'm going to call this meeting to order. And the first order of business, this is for the Thursday, April 14th, Utility Policy Committee meeting. First order of business is to call the roll. John Crum,
Present.
Sid Ellis, Libby Heine Cogswell.
Do I announce myself?
I'll get to your name. Peter Hefner.
Yes.
Tom Wheat.
Yes.
Jim Escamilla. I'm here. Alternate, Mark Elliott.
I'm here.
Thank you so much. May we have a motion to excuse the 2 absent Utility Policy Committee members?
So moved.
Motion made by Tom Wheat, supported by Jim Escamilla. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next is our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda, or are there any proposed changes? May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion. John Crum.
John Crum made the motion, supported by
Peter Hefner.
Peter Hefner. Thank you so much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Right. For yes?
Tim Hudson, with the Regional Commission. Jeff Sorensen, Cooper Township.
Thank you very much. Happy to have you here. Next item of business is to accept our minutes from Thursday, March 10th. Is there a motion?
Yes. Peter Hefner.
Motion made by Peter Hefner,
Support Tom Wheat.
supported by Tom Wheat. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Next is the opportunity for public comment. So we still have the opportunity for remote comment, correct?
Yes.
And do we need to announce the number, or is it available online so people would know how to call in?
Yep, they can just turn on their mics and speak.
Are there any public comments here in chambers? Any remote public comments?
No, no one's raising their hand.
Any public comments? All right. Hearing none. Next, we are to unfinished business, water connections, extensions, and fees.
That is a progress, a work still in progress.
Next item, that's Tom Wheat. Wendy, so still a work in progress. Next, rates process regarding water rate approval.
Nothing to report, Peter Hefner.
Okay. Next item, capital improvement program projects update. What through this agenda?
This is James Baker. I can give a brief update if the board would like to hear that. We've got a number of capital projects that are under construction, under design, or are construction continuations. And I'm not going to go through every one of the projects, list by list, but I am referencing, this is a City of Kalamazoo document. It's available online. I can share this. It's got all of our capital improvement projects in it. I've just flipped it over to where water sits. So we've got projects broken out into water infrastructure is a main topic area. We also have station improvements, water source and pumping, and then there's an actual classification of new water projects. It doesn't necessarily mean it's new. It's a new for this year of the CIP because it's a 5-year CIP. The other were reflected in the CIP before.
James,
Yes.
that's the same document you shared with us and we walked through. Correct?
I walked through more detailed documents, so the CIP that's available on the UPC web link is more detailed, specific just to water.
Okay.
This is the city's all-inclusive program, which has general fund and streets and everything else. So just bring some highlights to you for our water source and pumping. We've got a pretty big project that started out this year, about $12 million project at Station 5. It's our Station 5 improvement project, which is gonna completely remodel the entire station. It moves the footprint, and then it brings in iron treatment removal, manganese treatment removal, and PFAS treatment and removal. And then due to all those treatments and removals, that station now also has to be connected to sanitary sewer. So there will be a sanitary sewer extension to also serve that station. That work will start this fall, and that's going to be a 2-year build for that station.
Where's it
build out.
located?
It's located in City Kalamazoo, kind of right on the border of Kalamazoo Township, on East Michigan as you're heading out of town, at the corner of East Michigan and Skippers.
Is that or are you bidding it now?
We are in the process of bidding it. It's not out on our public bid yet, but it will be this summer. It should be.
Beware of supply issues.
Correct. Yeah, that we've been tracking that with a number of issues, and I'll talk about that with some of our water main projects. The treatment technology utilized for this was developed in cooperation with carbon manufacturer. So it's really specific to what was tested and bench tested at the site. So some of the materials for the site are really specific, and then some of them, Tom, you're familiar with everything to do with buildings or experiencing shortages and all kinds of stuff. So one of the things that we have been doing within our capital project delivery program is being flexible in timelines where we can. So there's been a number of projects where we've been able to hold costs within budget if we're flexible in timeline. Sometimes when we haven't been able to be flexible in timeline, we've seen a lot of cost escalations. And then sometimes we've seen cost escalations that were just out of our control.
And just to follow up on that, we're seeing it was sort of bigger and ductile iron pipe had long lead times. It's now getting into the standard size ductile iron pipe. The latest is an 8-inch ductile iron pipe is a 30-week lead time. So last year you could get it probably within a week or two. Now it's 30 weeks. So any job that we would want to start this year is now a 2023 job.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom. We'll get into some of our water main projects. So we've got water main projects that are going in on Angling Road. It's an Angling Road culvert. It's the title of the job, but it's a culvert replacement. It's also a water main job. We've got this year 33rd Street water main. We've got Parkview Ave that's starting this year. So these are pretty big water main jobs that we've been in the process of procuring the pipe. Next year, also Lovers Lane and I-94 are all water main jobs. But those jobs are all awarded. They're safe. They're going to go forward. The jobs that we've got lined up for next year was kind of where we're really kind of seeing these issues due to the lead time on pipe. So what the city's working on doing, we haven't formally announced this yet or come out to bid with this, but it's our intention to self-procure pipe. So that what we'll be doing is bidding out pretty large pipe only contracts. And so the city itself will procure the pipe. That way we can get pipe today. It'll show up 40 weeks from now, which is pretty much next year. And then on next year's jobs, we can provide the contractor with, we'll furnish the pipe, and then the actual work, which would be trench detail B and some of the other line items that are incorporated with excavating that would have to be just a bit tab. MDOT is already kind of aware of this issue. It's not just City Kalamazoo that's going through this. So MDOT has actually published recommendations and policy around how do you bid a labor-only water main install and furnish the pipe. So it's something that we're all going to be experiencing for the next year jobs.
So you're not gonna take possession, like you're just gonna leave it at like the loop or something like that, and they'll just hold it for you?
We very well, we'll probably take possession of the pipe ourselves. If I have it either at our Harrison facility or Stockbridge facility. There are 2 pipe vendors that I am currently aware of in the Kalamazoo area. And it may be possible that we may, furnish and leave some pipe on their yards, if
Is it
that's
all
allowed.
outside storage?
Yes, yeah, and all the pipes outside storage, and that's always been the case, usually with every job that we've done is, the pipe is procured by the contractor, it shows up usually just in time for the job, and it's placed out, on the job outside. Lead services update, we just awarded a pretty large project in Northside Kalamazoo. We'll be touching 37 streets with lead service line replacements. This is actually a good news project in terms of contractor availability and pricing. We set our quantities and our bid tab up reflective of our current average prices with a goal of obtaining about $5 million worth of work. And we did that and got low bids back around $3 million. So then we came back out with a change order and kind of executed a change order and the original contract together with the city commission. And that change order was the owner's request to add or increase quantity so that we could get the full utilization of $5 million. So we'll be executing about 600 lead service line replacements in Northside Kalamazoo. It's part of a bigger project. So that's just phase 1. Phase 2 will be an additional $14 million roundabout that will bid out next year and go through 2024. So we'll be in this project area defined as North Kalamazoo through 2024.
And any of that federal government money, or is it all?
State and federal. So the $5 million I'm talking about just recently, that's a grant, came from the state of Michigan. I believe it's got federal sources tied to it. And so that's, that's great news for Kalamazoo for that $5 million to come in. It's not rate dollars to help with this program. Sorry about that.
We say not rate dollars, then the bells start going.
Yeah, that's the alarm.
Is that?
So that's real quick overview of where we're at on some projects. Some project delays or constraints that we're looking at for next year and how we're kind of trying to plan to work around it. I would say overall from a budget standpoint, we're seeing a lot of volatility in the market. Anytime it looks like a building or contractors can see it as a building. And maybe Tommy, you've got some experience with that too. Seems like our pipe jobs keep coming in kind of on budget, but if it's 4 blocks together and 4 walls together, and then hey, that looks like a building. So it's 2-3 times what it used to cost.
Questions? Just, can I add to the CIP discussion?
Yeah.
We have done some background work, helping townships. We as Klein Hoff is working with townships. That's what we do to get background information so that they can start working on their water CIP as a requirement of the contract. So we're helping get that kicked off so that can be submitted to the UPC or the city. I'm not sure who we submitted to, but we submitted.
We'd like to get it at the city so we can get it incorporated in our 5 and 10-year CIPs. Certainly that can come to UPC too.
So that process is started. It'll be kicked off in the next couple of weeks as we start with the townships.
Any other discussion then on capital improvement? See none.
Are you up on the next one, rate consultants?
I can talk on that. We have published an RFQ, request for qualifications for rate consultants. Peter Hefner helped us with, and Jim Escamilla helped us getting that document out with some, some corrections and modifications that we made to it. So we were kind of pushing on some deadlines to get that out. So that's out. We plan to receive all those packets by April 26th, and then we'll bring that to the UPC. So we're just going to kind of package everything and bring that to the UPC so that UPC can review those qualification packets and give us some direction. And it's available online too. I don't know if anybody has an interest to take a look at it, or we participate in a number of listservs to include some national presence, and I've been kind of hearing back from mainly engineering consultants, or there's a few rate consultants to say, hey, we see your RFQ out here, but if anybody's got anybody that they'd like us to send it to, or if you know somebody or anything like that, we'd be happy to get it out there and make folks aware of what that web link is.
Peter Hefner, is there any reason for the UPC to perhaps put together like a group to assess this, the rate consultants?
Looking at the
Time-wise, that's my only concern.
yeah, looking at the contract, I think there's language that says the contract would be kind of the qualification team would be reviewed by a group consisting of 3 city representatives and 4 township representatives, which is the UPC. So,
Sure.
I guess I'd leave that up to the UPC. If the UPC determined, hey, we're going to have all of us or some of us look at that, that's.
So I would put that out there just for discussion, whether we would need to take some action to say, you guys do this, because these things will be back before our next meeting. So that's the reason I'm asking that question. And so from your perspective, James, is there any reason for us to take action for our next meeting? Because at our nethere meeting, then we would probably, maybe we dedicate it to looking at this thing, or then we got to wait another 2 weeks to get people back together. Is there any timing issue? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some of the thought of, well, you're going to show up at your next meeting and we'd like you to make a determination on the rate consultant. So I hope you can read fast, right? Because you just read through all these. So maybe there needs to be some work that happens between the time period when we receive
comes
these.
in on the 26th?
It
About.
Yeah, that's the qualifications are due April 26th at 3 p.m. So, it's kind of, that day is pretty much set.
The fees?
Fees are tied to it, yeah.
So I would just ask the UPC if we would like to perhaps get the responses back to several individuals or everybody. And there is within the RFQ, it says, here's how we're going to measure you based on some criteria. I think it's typical what the city's using. And so we may need some input from a city person too, to say, here's the checklist we use, or whatever that may be. And I just want to make sure we're on time. I'm not trying to push it, but if we need to select someone at the next meeting, we ought to probably take some action, or at least set aside some people are going to do something, is my thought.
Would the UPC be interested in kind of going through, like a sheet where you're like a scoring sheet or a scoring exercise at a meeting?
So the contract says selection of rates consultant selection committee candidates shall be vetted by and interviewed by a selection committee made up of 3 city appointed members of the utility policy committees or their alternates, or township appointed members of the utility policy committee. Sounds like the utility policy committee. Each member of the selection committee shall rate each candidate using a scale approved by the selection committee. So it's something like that. But it sounds like it's the selection committee is UPC.
Is the UPC.
So maybe what we would need to do is just theoretically, if we need to make a response next meeting, that we should get these packets, that we could all take a look at it. And then perhaps we say, our normal meeting is hopefully brief, we're gonna spend 2 hours after that interviewing people, or what, you know what I mean? If there's 20 documents, we want to try to narrow it down before we get there. I don't know, if we need to have this done, I'm just throwing it out there. What do you guys want? And gals?
I have a question. What is our normal purchasing? What would be the first scan on that process?
So normally with this, this is a professional services. So it's really about the qualifications of the firm and you know, what the evaluation team feels that, you know, that firm how they can work with our group, so to speak, that kind of thing. Usually, so we would go through and score to see kind of who's qualified. Just some past examples of, this is often done with engineering firms, is that we get, say, 20 responsive packets, and then we'll look through and score, and then we kind of come back and we've selected, you know, the 3 highest scores would be the 3 firms that we pick. We've picked 4 or 5 firms for things. What's been unique in the past is that we don't usually have just one engineer for anything. You know, so we'll qualify 5 or 6 or 10 engineering firms for something, and then as we go through, you know, a 3 or 5 year period, we're selecting different engineers to do different, you know, work scopes. This is somewhat unique because your goal, if I understand it correctly, is to select one rate consultant. So you're going to have to step through some further steps that we have, the more steps than we've ever taken. You know, in my recent experiences, that we haven't gone all the way down to just one firm for one thing. You know, there are examples in the city where that has been done from time to time, but most of our experience in public services is a few, and then there's a lot of work going on. You know, we're passing from.
So I would, let's just say you have a scale of 1 to 100. You get 3 in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, so you're gonna say, all right, we're gonna interview these 3, and then you pick one. But then at some point you need to open up their fees, right? When do you do that?
So we don't open the fees until you've made your selection on who you want.
So what if you don't like your fee?
Well, then you could step back. I guess you could step back at that point. That's not necessarily following the QBS process.
It is.
I mean, it is if you get to the end and you just don't like the fees, but the fees shouldn't be the driving factor.
Not the total, but it is a factor.
Okay, yeah.
You know, Tom, don't you think a factor?
Aren't the fees based on a scope that is sort of understood? You know, is this process can take 100 hours or 1,000 hours? And if you get a fee for
If they have a budget, you're saying?
no, I'm just saying you sort of have an understanding of how much work goes into doing this thing. And if all of a sudden the fees are double what you've been paying, there's raise your hand. Say,
Yeah,
what's going
There's a
on?
number. They should have.
Yeah, you'll have a per hour number.
Oh, I understand that, but you also understand today what it takes to do that work.
Mhm.
It's like if you tell an engineer to design a mile of pipe.
Yep.
You have an idea how much that's going to cost. And as long as you open up that fee and is within a reason, hire.
It's just gonna be a rate, right?
Is that all? it is?
Right, that's all you're
Yeah,
gonna
they
see at
just
this
give you a
point
rate.
because you haven't developed
That's just
the full
rate.
scope. Yeah.
Right. So we'll,
That's kind of insignificant.
yeah, so then once we select someone, theoretically, we would say, we want to have a rate calculated. Here's what it involved. What do you think it's going to take to do this? Yeah. And you say, do it, or, you know, well, we get to determine whether a rate is even calculated, the UPC.
Is it just a rate or is it a fee?
So you'll in your packets that you'll see like a fee schedule of what their firm charges for different services. You won't have a fully developed RFP yet. I think you'll select the firm, you'll review what their pricing strategy is. And then if you're happy with that, you can go forward and say, hey, we want you to, look at water rates for next year or any other rate related work product.
Does that result in a fixed price contract? Once you've gotten there? Or is that just, is it a not to exceed? What does that look like? Once you get into the actual,
Yeah, I mean, usually they're based on scope, so you can work kind of back and forth through a proposal to say, hey, we want you to calculate rates. What do you think it's going to cost?
Give us an estimate.
Give us an estimate, and then I'll come back and say, hey, it's $25,000. I don't know. It's just, that's an example. $25,000 to do the rates for 2023. Okay, and then you're into the work, and you say, hey, well, what about rates in 2037? What's that going to look like? And we also want you to look at this, and should it be $5,500 for a service connection? And if you start putting more onto it, then it's going to change. So if you change scope, then it's going to change.
And that would be typical of your industry as well.
Could you have two firms that are approved to give you numbers?
Yeah,
And are,
I don't see why not. I think that's a UPC decision on what the UPC wants to go.
because you just said you were going to do an RFP after, right?
Correct. We would
And so
do.
if you, let's call it your preferred vendors.
Yep.
Whatever, be 2 or 3 people, and then you could ask, when you define what your scope is, you can ask for proposals from both of them.
You could have, and we do that from time to time on engineering jobs. We'll ask 2 or 3 of our firms for an RFP for a specific job.
So you see this in theory any different?
No,
can you remind me what our time frame is on the goal on having this work get started and how much we're going to add to this process?
That's what I'm trying to,
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
so when do we need to have someone selected? Are you thinking next meeting?
I would say, well, let's work back. So ideally in July, sometime within July, I'm not specific on July 1st or July 31st, but sometime within July, we'd really like to have a rate consultant on board, starting to work with the numbers, starting to see what our capital projections are looking like, starting to look at our year end, starting to kind of get a feel for where the numbers are. If there's, that could get picked up quicker. I guess if someone's willing to work fast, we could start in August, but that's really kind of pushing.
So we need someone in July. Next month is May, right? And so I would, and I would put out there, this group needs to make the decision on who gets selected. I'm just throwing out there, I'm not sure everyone on here needs to go through 14 RFPs. Do you say 2, 3 people are gonna bring something to this group and why, and move on? And if that's the case, then perhaps those 3 people ought to get those RFPs when they come in, so at the next meeting, they can say, we're gonna get together in 2 weeks, we all have the material, we've reviewed it, and they're approved to do this work, whoever they may.
Separate from this.
Yes. Just a thought, so I'm just throwing it out there, we can just say, understood, James, they're coming in on the 26th, bring them to the next meeting. What do we wanna do? And then we can move on.
You said they're due April 26th.
They're due 3 p.m. April 26th.
So it's like 2 weeks.
What day of the week is that?
It's a Tuesday.
Okay, so maybe this group, if we decide to have one, could get them on the next day or the next day. It gives you 12 or 14 days there's a lot of them. I just don't know what you're gonna get. I have no idea.
Question at the beginning of that, is it possible that there will be any that just don't meet the minimum requirements? You have some baseline that, or is it everyone's in?
I would say if they haven't done one,
Yeah,
they're out.
it's possible. You could get a firm that in the UPC's opinion is quite capable of doing the rates.
You're not gonna do any pre-eval on that.
We
You're just
won't,
pass
no,
it.
we'll pass everything.
Tom, will you be submitting?
So again, into the contract. It talks about that there's gonna be 3 city UBC members and 4 township UBC members, which is the UBC is the selection committee.
Right, but they need to make the selection. Do they have to do the measurement?
But it goes beyond that, and each member of the selection committee shall rate each candidate using a scale approved by the selection committee, which is us, based on the candidate's knowledge of the rating process, knowledge of the utility rate making system, so it goes on to list a couple things. So the way this is set up is we do the matrix, and we all give our own scores, and it's awarded to the highest person. I don't know that, I don't like that. We named the dog that way with our kids one time, and it turned out not great.
Right. Well, I mean, each person needs to make this selection. Does that mean they, could they say, here is a group that says, here's our preferred selection. What is yours? Well, mine's exactly what you're suggesting. Or, so we need to make a call here.
Tom, is there anything in that document that you would prevent, say, individual or group work product to say like, as a group, you can score these firms versus as individuals. So, if you're scoring as individually.
All it says is each member shall rate. It doesn't say
Okay.
that it has to be in a vacuum.
Okay. Well, that could provide perhaps some iteration between.
Yeah.
And I think this is the score rate's a 7. Why do you think that? There could be some dialogue amongst the UBC to help through the score.
Others rated.
Right.
And we
So
have to
that's
do
a-
this in public?
For
Yeah, I believe
3
so.
and 4.
Yeah.
Quorum.
Yeah, so I'm just throwing that out there, or everybody be ready to go through them. I just don't know how many you get. You might get 3, no big deal. We'll look at it and let's do it. You might get 25 of them.
Yeah.
So I
Or
would
they might
probably
be
not-
30 pages long each. I just don't know.
I probably won't have any experience with any of them, in this type of business. And you do, I would hope that, you could, based on past experience, sway the group on, this is our experience with this company, even though they show really good on paper. Right?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any ability for city to provide input to this. Well, I mean, with city representatives, but
Sure.
I don't know
I think
Yeah.
what our
UBC,
role is.
UBC would be open to any input.
Okay.
Doesn't make any sense to just to say we're not listening to anything other than us.
My concern is if you get 14 or 15, you don't know which ones haven't played well in the past with the city of Kalamazoo either. I think that's a piece of information.
I suspect you're going to get, this is just my suspect, you're going to get a bunch that you've never heard of them.
Right.
I just don't think you got a lot of rate consultants in Kalamazoo or been here. There's been one here for 20-something years. That's it. Right?
Yeah, correct.
The same one. That's my guess, but I mean, every engineering firm may want to do this or does it. I just don't know. But we should determine how we want to proceed, or maybe we just say, bring them to the next meeting, we'll figure it out. But their time is of some essence.
Yeah. Well, if we look at today's meeting agenda, right, there are things that are in the works that aren't going to need to be discussed next time we meet. So what's wrong with setting aside the next meeting solely on the focus of an interview and measurement scale for a consultant and decision making? It's 2-hour meeting.
Well, interview, that means we have to get them ready.
Yeah. Well, because we probably want to talk to 3, not 15.
Yeah.
Right, correct.
But also, if we want to do that, that's totally fine with me. I'm good with it. But get us the stuff in advance, because if there's 15, it might be 40 hours worth of work.
So if we get the information on the 26th, we'll have it.
Yeah.
tabulate it. Throw it out onto the website.
And let us know.
Let us know to have a look at it.
And the checklist that has been used historically, perhaps.
And then would it be too late? Because that would give us 3 weeks to look at it. This is next UPC on the 26th of
Next is the 12th of May.
May 12th.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so that's 2 weeks after, so Liz.
Right?
It gives us 2 weeks to look at it and come to the next UPC meeting, maybe the next agenda on the UPC meeting, nothing else than that.
Well, yeah, and you might get 3. That doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean? So if there's
You're not
3,
gonna-
I don't know that it's that big a deal.
You won't open the rates.
No,
If you will not do that.
we will not
until after
do
we
that until after.
score.
Correct.
And so my question would be, I don't know if we need to take some action, but to provide Libby with some, if there's 3, let's talk to them that day, right? And if there's 13, maybe not, but I mean, so how do we make that call?
If I might
Yeah,
maybe bridge what I'm hearing,
yeah,
your concerns, Peter, and Tom's interpretation of the agreement. Tom relies upon, I think, the committee recognizes you're gonna need to rely upon, you, David, you're gonna need to rely upon your professional staff and their depth of expertise, because the members on this committee don't really have that depth except for a couple of people here. So I think you can bridge that by having that input. And I know with respect to being expeditious, the real need that I think, Peter, you're trying to identify is we may need that input faster for us to make those decisions. And I think you just need to spread that information around with respect to who you're going to rely upon, with respect to your technical staff, so that those can be brought forward. And I think the only real bridge you have to cross is for this review of the RFP. I think you're going to have to suspend your discussion policies, because those other representatives won't be able to speak, because you've said representatives can only the voting members can speak during those discussions. So you're going to have to just take that RFP review outside of your normal process here and open it up, because I think you're going to want those technical people around you to add to the discussion when you do that process. Is that kind of?
yeah, well, my only thought is theoretically, if there are 3 proposals, I would personally like to email Libby and say, get them lined up to talk to us. If there's 13, probably gonna have to be some other day, to talk, if we want to talk to them at all. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know, or maybe it doesn't matter. I don't need to talk to them. Give me what you got. It's good enough.
Sorry.
Our June meeting is the 9th of June. Is that sufficient enough to make a choice by then for the city council? So in the event, if there are 13 or more, or some greater than 3 for the comfort level changes, does it make sense that the May meeting is the one that, if there's more than 3, that you don't have the interview process? We're grading and trying to whittle down to 3, and then the June meeting is the interview process of 3 and then the decision making.
That's
We
fine.
still need timeline
Sure.
for the city council.
If that's soon enough. I'm
Is
good
that
with it.
soon enough?
Yes, if there's a concise recommendation in June, that's plenty. That meets our deadline, and we can
Okay.
get to work in July. And even just, I think we would continue to be on progress if in July, is your UPC meeting July 7th or July 14th?
I think it's important.
Okay.
14.
I think even if we had to, get we could still make July work, even if, you know, so if it continued to go out another month. But past, we couldn't go past July.
Just random things, no particular order. Talk about a measurement or evaluation tool that we're going to create and approve, right?
There is one in the RFP. It says, here's what we're gonna consider. I just didn't know if there's something more that the city does.
There's a rubric already.
It's,
Okay.
Does that look good, Peter?
you know, I wasn't trying to measure that. I was trying to get it to be consistent with the
Yeah.
contract. And I figured that was the city's process. I just didn't really even do anything other than read that component.
So what we could do is we could pull
Cut
that out
Yeah,
and,
it would.
you know, kind of put that in Excel and clean it up, so it's just a standalone. We could give that to the UPC.
That would be great.
Review and
And
comment,
please do.
and then you would be ready to go. with that.
And I assume that's the city's process, right?
Correct, and
Okay, that's good.
they've changed, you know, whether we're reviewing, say, a landscape architecture firm, or we're looking at a, bridge structural firm.
Yeah.
That specific scoring matrix may change a little bit. One of the things that you might want to consider would be scoring for local preference. We would usually have, some scores for if the firm's local, in Michigan or in Council County. You may look at this and say, is that even relevant in this case?
And we can determine that at the next meeting.
You can determine that at the next meeting, but that may be something that's, been consistent with us. That just use example for civil engineering firms. If you are a Michigan firm, you're going to score higher. If you're a firm located in Kalamazoo County or offices located in Kalamazoo County, you'll score even higher. And depending on, I think you made the comment before, Peter, on how many rate consultant firms are in this area, that may not be a factor that would be of value for you.
Another thing I presume is that we're going to want to do some reference checking also.
Yeah, so if we could narrow it down by the next, at the next go round, then we could, I'd say these are some people we even know that they're doing studies for, perhaps, and say, let's check these 3 jobs on these 3 people and see what happens or whatever.
So when it comes to that, or making calls or reference checks, that kind of business, are we going to do that as a committee, or some of this work? Are we going to ask staff to do it?
Maybe we ask somebody on your staff to do that.
Yeah.
And we can make that call.
Yeah.
We
I
say,
think it should be the same person, so it's consistent, whoever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would be happy to provide any support, however that's needed to get, the UPC to a best decision.
So David, just to let you know that if it is a June vote, I will be in Alaska. So maybe is that when Mark would vote?
you actually don't have an alternate.
We don't have an alternate.
Oh, okay.
That's on our agenda. I think that's next.
But you could get one,
Yeah, if you
theoretically.
get one.
Yes.
I don't know if we're having more discussion about that.
We haven't had any real internal discussion on, supplying
So it's
UPC
just
alternates.
3 of us at this point.
And you can always measure that too, just theoretically. Let's say you're not going to be here for X, Y, Z meeting, but it's pretty much everybody knows what we're going to do anyways. It really won't be a big deal. Or maybe you want someone specific and then you do need that alternate, but something to consider.
It's going to be interesting, I'm sure. I mean, some of us probably have some expertise in this area, and I have no expertise in this area. So it's going to be an interesting evaluation process for me. I will be very dependent, actually, as you mentioned, on any input I get from technical staff and that sort of thing. I won't know what any red flags in particular to look for or that sort of thing.
I think from that standpoint, we would welcome staff's thoughts on it.
Okay, so let's just hear out loud what the plan is one more time then. So we're gonna Is it good, are these packets gonna get distributed once they come in?
Yeah, we could, put the packets on the UPC web link
And notify
and then
us
notify, the UPC members when that has occurred.
along with the rubric or whatever.
Along with this, the matrix.
Yep.
I would caution against actually having that done by, if we don't get them until 3 o'clock on the 27th, it's probably gonna be the 28th.
Yeah, or maybe by Friday or something,
Yeah,
so they have something to do it.
Yeah,
And then what are we planning to be prepared to do then at our main meeting?
Discussion,
Review it and discuss on the spot.
and, yeah, and that's sufficient, because if you get 20, we want to get it down to.
And let's do this plan, subject to change. If you end up with 150, let Libby have the power to say,
Oh,
we gotta have a work session or something,
Yes.
right?
That'd be good.
Okay. I don't think we need to have a motion on that or anything, but we're pretty clear about where we're at this point. Yeah. Wendy, you feel like you got that okay?
it's Karen.
Oh, Karen?
Rutherford, yeah.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Alternate, yes, which is what we need. Sorry, Karen. All right, so, already sort of mentioned the next thing. No, we don't have any alternative appointments. I note this here. I do want to mention, just while we're on that particular line item, is people may have noticed that Sid Ellis just got a new job. Sid Ellis was director of Douglas Community Association. Now he's been hired as the executive director of the Land Bank, Kalamazoo County Land Bank. So that just happened the last week or so. I have not heard from Sid whether this could affect his availability or schedule at all. So I haven't had that conversation with him. But anyway, that's one thing that's happened. All right, bylaws, finalization and compensation, pre-approved bylaws, designate WPH.
Yes.
Just rolling with your initials now.
So the bylaws have been approved.
Yeah.
They were approved and then we added to them.
Yep.
And in the bylaws, it says the UPC will designate the professionals. So I think we should have a motion to designate those individuals to be professionals. And then it says UPC will approve the rates. So do you do that via looking at the bills that get submitted, or do you prefer to have the professionals identify their rates and approved by the UPC? Tom?
I think it's one and the same.
To look at the bill?
Yeah, because the UPC will be looking at the bill for the city council.
Which therefore approves the rate. Sure.
Right, but we do need to approve the professionals now. Is that the fact that someone submits a bill and the UPC looks at it, is that their approval of the professional? Or
No,
would you?
I think it makes sense to take formal action
Okay.
right now.
Okay,
Are you making a motion then on the professional part of it?
to approve the professionals?
Yeah.
I would make that motion that there are 3 professionals, 1 designated by the city, Jim, and 2 designated by the townships, which would be Peter and Tom, for approval by the UPC. Does that make sense?
I second that motion.
Any discussion about it? All right. I think we need a roll call on this one.
Who's second? The motion?
John,
I'm sorry.
John Crum.
Yes. All right.
Point of order, is it?
Yeah. Yes.
Are we, do we need to abstain?
Well, that's gonna.
Yeah,
throw a
that's not
wrench
gonna
in the
have a
works.
quorum.
It would not be a quorum vote.
It's a good question.
Well, I would, can I modify my motion?
Sure.
I would motion Peter Hefner that Tom Weed is a professional of the UPC.
All right, so you're withdrawing your motion.
For 3,
Would you
Right,
rather
support
I
for
make
it.
a motion for all 3 professionals?
you can't, if we are abstaining, we don't,
So that's why we're gonna do them one at a time.
that's why we're
Okay.
doing one. Tom Weed as a professional.
Is there support for that motion?
I will support that motion.
Any discussion about the motion to designate Tom Lee?
I will abstain.
All right, Tom Lee is going to be abstaining from this. Then, all in favor, please, well, I guess we'll do a roll call on this, Karen. So,
Or raise your hand.
or raise your hand or something like that, sure. All in favor of this motion, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay.
I, Peter Hefner, will propose that Jim is a professional of the UPC.
I'll second.
Got that, Karen? Thank you. All right, any discussion on that motion? All right, all in favor of designating Jim as a professional member?
In the discussion, are you asking to abstain?
I will after,
I was abstained during the vote.
yeah, well, after you, everyone votes and that's the next.
Okay,
Either way.
all right.
Yeah, right, same
So,
thing.
all right, yeah. All in favor, please say aye. And
Aye.
opposed, nay. Abstentions?
One abstention.
Jim is abstaining on this particular motion.
I'll move to recommend Peter Hefner as a professional UPC committee.
Is there support?
I'll support that.
I'll abstain.
All in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
Raise your hand. All opposed, nay. Abstentions? Here, have. That was clever. All right. So professionals have been designated, and what do we need to do about this, the hourly rate bills? Do we need to take any action on that?
I think we need information from the city. So Tom, would you explain what's occurred so far?
So must have been the February meeting, I was asked to come up with some language that would be
Scope of service.
scope of services from us to the city. I sent that to Jeff, and go CC'd you on that.
Yeah.
Just to see what that language was. That was basically just a scope of services that could be put to a purchase order with the city, so that when we send our bills into the city, it can get paid.
Then you can get paid.
And worked with Jim and Peter on that. We agreed on the language, sent it to Jeff. We haven't heard back. So we need to have that done so that we can get a PO so that we can our bill. So that needs to be done. It's sort of been languishing a little bit. I know everybody's busy, but we need to get the POs.
When did that go back to Jeff?
I sent it on the 11th of February.
And I think, I'm sorry, Tom, I think you gave your fees, right, to him, but we didn't give our fees.
Well, we want to see if that is sufficient scope, and we'll all have the same one.
I think that just sort of came along with because this is sort of a letter, and then there's just that professional services agreement goes with that and our fees. That just went with it. So that wasn't really a submittal, that was more of a, here's the letter that would go with your PO.
So I think, just to be clear, I think we're looking to get, we need a letter from each one of the firms, which we'll take that. The updated bylaws, that was one outstanding item. We had that
Okay.
now.
Yep.
And then the scope of services. So those kind of like the 3 items
Okay.
Well,
together.
we're still waiting for Jeff to indicate that this is
Okay.
an appropriate letter,
Okay.
and then I can get it out in 5 minutes.
And then we'll go from there. Okay. So I'll follow up with that just to make sure. I think on the hourly rate, what we were looking for is that the UPC sets a rate, says the UPC agrees to pay professionals, this rate for 2022. And then when you're invoicing for scope of work, your per hour rate would match up with the UPC approved rate. So that was kind of what we were looking at.
So you're looking for the UPC to approve a rate, and our thought is they are going to approve the rate when they get the bill. Theoretically. So I can share with you one detriment to saying it's X.
Okay,
My rate's higher than other people's.
okay.
And if you want everybody to have a higher rate than they actually charge, we can do that.
Oh, no, what we were
Or
talking.
vice versa, you know what I mean?
In the bylaws, it's each of our individual rates. It's
Right,
not
right.
just our own rate.
So I don't think it's a wise thing to say it's X when it's gonna be higher than they actually are, theoretically. I would propose that each of the professionals provide a bill to the UPC for the next meeting. We can review it, approve it, and if we can get some information from the city, we can submit them. Or not approve them. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. And so maybe just a response from Jeff to say that seems to be a reasonable scope of service. We'll each provide it, but the thought was to get you to say
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
This is the catch up since the summer.
So I would propose that we provide that information to a Wendy for the next time the minutes go out.
Okay.
If it's okay with you, gentlemen, I will contact you. I see the minutes before they go out and say, here, come on, give me your bill, so we can send them out. And then we can move forward.
One's a appeal takes together.
Sometimes pretty quick. This one may take a little bit. I would say, probably 2 weeks is a fair estimate.
So we'll probably get this done before the next.
Yeah.
Does that address that agenda item then?
I think so.
So there's really nothing on revenue and expense reports, correct?
We haven't posted any new revenue and expense reports. They are, all previously ones that have been submitted will continue to be up on the UPC web link.
Can you do the quarter for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's sufficient.
We could do that.
Nothing on our agenda for the invoice approval for this meeting. Nothing else for new business that anybody wants to bring up?
I wanted to, what time are we at?
No, almost 9:30.
I don't know if this is the right time to do this, but I brought back, as I had proposed, the summary of what the responsibilities of the UPC are. And I changed it slightly just to add more from the contract. And my thought is the UPC should kind of have, these are the things we're going to need to be working on over, as we're learning about this thing. So in 3.6A, if I may, I'm going to walk you through this document. Is that okay with all?
Sure.
3.6A, we have to identify the rate consultant. We're working on it, right? Let's turn the page. We also have input on the following items, which include the utility financial policy, the capital improvement plan, which we've been doing, the level of reserves, which are included in the rate calculation, the reserve fund deposits, that's also included in the rate calculation. Transfers, number 5 is in the rate calculation, 6 is in the rate calculation, 7, cost of operations, et cetera, is in the rate calculation, 8, cost of service study frequency. So at this point, we're planning to have a cost of service study for next year. We haven't made that final determination. We could say, no need, we just had a grant that covered a bunch of our capital. Let's hold the line for a year, theoretically. But number one, we've done nothing. So I would ask that this be brought to us next time, James. That would be the utility utility financial policy, and that's the level of reserves and some other framework that's used to drive the rates. And I think within the RFP, there was like this utility policy, but then there was a ton of other stuff in there. I think the policy is actually just a couple paragraphs. The reserves, this, but we should all, at least, we have input into it, so we should know what it is.
Yeah, so the City of Kalamazoo Utility Financial Policy is a document that's already on the UPC web link. It's a bit dated. It's from 1994, I believe. And it just kind of goes into city policy on just a lot of those things you just referenced, Peter. I will add that there's, depending on, bond market, things like that, there's, some things that current standard right now practice for coverage ratios, some of those items have gone above what that policy statement holds, and then we've been kind of,
So we should
moved
have,
with it.
we should have input into what that policy is.
Correct. And then the ability, I think, and where this really comes to play is when you're in the rate setting process. And you look and you say, look, our utility financial policy sets our minimum coverage ratio at 1.4, 140%. And S&P 500, S&P, last time the ratings agency, we have been told time and time again, and bond covenants, bond ordinance says we require 200%. So if we have bond covenants, bond ordinance, that's our ordinance. It requires us to be at 2.0. We have to be at 2.0, regardless of what that old document may say.
Yeah, so, and I'm somewhat familiar with what you're referring to. So what I would suggest to you is if they say you need to be at 200, you ought to be talking to this group because there's alternatives to revenue bonds.
Yeah.
And I think per the contract, I'm not sure that theoretically you should do that and not follow your policy. But so one step in the right direction might be for us to understand what your bond covenants are.
Correct.
And so if we could get your bond covenants, sometimes they're pretty lengthy and they're about 50 years old generally, and on and on. But could we get that from the most recent bond issue, the bond covenants?
Yeah, we can. We're just going through an issue right now.
Yeah. So if you could give me those, or us those, and then we could review this for the next time we come together. If you would like, I'll provide you with the summary of the utility policy, utility financial policies, and the bond covenants in a comparison. Or you can all look through that document just the same as I'm going to, or I can just report back to you. But this is something we're supposed to do. Just throw it out there. That makes sense?
Peter, another example, if I may, kind of bring up for the board as we talk about coverage ratio. And things like that. And this is something that UPC is going to really want to get involved with. Is that when we're kind of at the rate setting table and we say, look, we got to catch up a little bit on your coverage ratio. So the rate increase is 10%, but you've dropped a little bit on your coverage ratio. We need a 14% rate increase. So that decision, as you're collecting funds, you're collecting money from ratepayers just to put money in the bank. That's the only purpose.
Right. So just realize this coverage ratio is saying, how much do I have to charge people compared to what it costs? And he's saying 200%. But you factor out capital and debt service. But I mean, that could drive your rate through the roof. So we ought to have input and insight into that. And what you do with that 200% is you start to finance the capital and not bonds, is what they're driving you to do. It's not like it's just in the bank. You have some things that are legally restricted. You can't spend it.
Correct.
If you charge 200% of rates, you're going to have a lot of money available to do capital, and your rates are going to be high. So we need to have that input. So that's something in here that we need to do, and I would like to have those couple items. Okay. We can retain a consultant, and I'm on B on page 2. And I just want to understand this. So if we decide we need a consultant to come in and determine if, the quality of of the workmanship on installations or whatever it might be. What are we gonna have to do to get that consultant? Just so that we are aware that, okay, we need to take some action and get a list of consultants today, or is it, let's say we think they would be less than $25,000. Can we just say, we need a consultant for X and get a PO in a week or a month, or tell us the story so we understand that. I think it's important.
Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna try to kind of walk through a few scenarios, understanding this may be broad and it might not apply
Yeah.
to every scenario. So, the city currently has a few consultants, I'd say, between, engineering. We just talked a lot about process for a rate consultant. That your process for rate consultant is, laid out in the contract. It's very detailed. But if you need, like a steak dinner consultant to, tell you how to cook steak. I don't know. I'm just throwing
Somebody
wild examples.
not
out
on
there.
your list. How do we
Right,
get
somebody
them?
not on our list, how do you get it? I think the first step is just come to us, let us know what you want to look, what are you seeking?
Yep.
And what are some of your desired qualifications?
Okay.
We want, this firm or, this group of individuals to have these, background references or things like that. We'll put together an RFQ, just kind of like the one that went out. And then, we'll bring you back those packets. I think it could go quicker because it's not as formal as that rate. You've got real dedicated steps, but we would probably like to follow.
So we're
the
talking
QPS process too.
4 months or something.
Probably about 90 days.
Okay. How about if we are anticipating the cost to be less than 25,000?
If it's less than 25,000,
Can we avoid that and say we need whatever it is? I just want to understand because if we need it,
usually you can.
or we should know.
You could reach right out. We'd want to have some competition. So
Okay.
you'd really want to get a proposal.
Okay.
From a number, at least 3 firms. What I'm kind of
Can you do
challenged
that by just like calling 3 firms and saying, give us a proposal?
You could, but I think some of my challenge or concern here is that if it's just, you wanted to buy, some fittings, you could do that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about professionals. And
Okay.
professionals, we always want to make sure we're following the QBS process. And so we're going through a qualification process to make sure, even if it's low in scope, even if it is only.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I wanted to understand.
Right.
And also this group has the ability to hire consultants. So if we need an attorney to look at some legal issues quickly or whatever, we're going to need to follow that process. So under C, we get to approve the rates. We've already done that. Our authority under D is the selection of the rate consultant. We also determine if we're going to have a rate consultant. And we also get to look at their work product and the supporting information that comes from the city. So at this point, the city is providing us with revenue expense reports on a quarterly basis, a budget, an audited financial statement, but we could basically say, show us what each rate payer is paying, because there's a question about X, Y, Z. So we have that authority. Not that we need to go there today. We need to go to the utility financial policies. And also there is, under number 8 on page 3, conduct a periodic review of billing and collection services. So there is a need for us to do some assessing of your processes. So I'm putting this out there so we're aware of it, but we should revisit and say, what do we want to look at when, if anything, or only when we are concerned? I'm not interested. But this says to do that. Also on number E, we get to have input on the long-term policies, early retirement of debt. So is there any intent for that?
I would have to get back. That's probably a Mr. Cincy question.
Okay, all billing and collection methods, all requests to expand the public water supply system. So there's no intent of expanding the public water supply system, correct?
I think there is.
Okay.
There's been discussions with Alamo Township.
Okay.
There's kind of constant discussions within the current township profile. And there's going to be some future need or discussion into Ross Township. So that is a current,
So prior to taking action, on any of the following, the city shall consult and obtain input from us.
correct.
Okay, so you're gonna do that. I just want to
Correct,
make sure
yeah,
everybody,
yeah.
I'm not concerned with it, but you understand where I'm coming
Yeah, and with the Alamo, just for example, we've had maybe one or two conversations with Alamo Township, and that was a focus of one of our conversations was that, you've got to go get an engineer. Your engineer's got to kind of figure this out, come back to us. We've got to say, whether or not it makes sense. And then we've got to get you in front of the UPC.
Okay, good.
Because even if it makes technical sense and we can do it, that decision to expand outside of what we currently serve to go into a new township, that's a UPC decision.
And so we should understand that, but also, you know what I mean, so. And then under F, periodic review of service and cost of services on all of these different components. So we're looking at this from the revenue and expenditure perspective when we get our quarterly report, but I'm pointing this out to everyone.
And those period, all those listed services and things like that, that's an appendix to the original contract. And it goes in there and it says like, yeah, your water bill is this much in rate ordinance. But what if we come and put a 3/4 inch brass fitting on a new house? How much is that? So we've got that build sheet of all those things. If it's residential and it's a service, it's just a flat fee.
Yep.
$5,500 for yard and street together, whether it's a near side or far side. And if it's only a yard service, it's $2,500. We reviewed those this year, and we didn't feel the need to change them. So we'll look at changing those, perhaps next year. So we were able to hold the $5,500, connection fee for, over a 2-year period.
And then also on the top of page 4, we had not more frequently than every 4th year to conduct a benchmark study regarding the service and cost of services provided by the city. So we're 4 years away from, not that it has to happen, but we could say, hey, how are we comparing with other places? We haven't gone. I think the townships need to submit a master plan. It's under 5.1. Tom's on top of that. Expansion of production and or transmission. We just have some input into these things, basically. Expansion of the distributions, the city with input and comment from us may expand the distribution, production, et cetera, et cetera. We're giving that input when you give us a CIP. Then the water rates, I'm turning it over to page 5. The last part of this really talks about how the rate is calculated and what our input is. But I wanted to go through this again, and I hadn't for 5 months, just to see if there's some things we're missing. I think it's that financial policy issue. On page 6, this really is part of the contract as well, just for us to be tracking the revenue and expenses of the operation. So you got direct operation, maintenance, repair tracking. And my question would be under that item is the work order system. Is there any reporting you could provide to us that would say, here's where we're working and what we're doing? Or, you have a work repairs. Yeah, or whatever it is you're tracking, because it says the city shall implement a work order and cost tracking system. You have one.
Correct. We have a computerized asset management system right now. It's Lucity, and if we go out, we do a change meter out or work order at a customer house, leak of a service. It's all going to be tracked into that. There's not a costing feature in that currently.
Okay, it's just like the materials or something.
But just shows the work was done.
Okay.
And if the part or the work was significant to the repair, it would be noted. So like a main break, we came out and we put a new section of pipe in that's significant to the repair, that'd be noted. But if we came out and put a clamp on, it might not show you, the clamp or part number
Is there a means by which you could share with us, like, here's where our time is spent working?
I think so. And so one of the things that we started this year, we developed a report in December, and then we've carried that, through. So we've got to January, February. We should have a March here shortly. Is what we're calling a director's monthly report, and we've been preparing that in anticipation to share that with the UBC.
Okay.
So that we're probably ready to start
great.
bringing that forward, and it's gonna show you kind of some water production numbers, how much we're pumping from where. It's going to show you some work activity values and numbers, how much of these calls are we getting, like water quality complaints or, service line.
Yeah,
leaks
that would
or
be
things like
great.
that. So it's a way to kind of start to understand and get some perspective and context on the work we're doing, where we're doing it. So I think that's going to meet kind of what you talked about. But drilling all the way into that work order system to say.
No,
that
I
it's
think if you had a
tracking, it's not-
summary that,
not quite yet.
if we had a concern, we have the ability to do all these things.
Yeah,
So I said I would bring this last time, and I would just suggest that with your authorization, that I could bring back to you like the covenants in summary versus what the utility policy says. If you're interested in that, if not, I will do it for my own interest perspective. And that allows us to then we could have some input into saying, geez, it does make sense. It's going to be a much better rate to change that policy if it makes sense or not.
It's helpful, I think.
Thank you. I'd love to see that. I think this is kind of like completely off of what Peter was talking about. You pump so much water, you bill for that water once it gets to point of use. If the differential between leakage or.
yes, correct. It's water loss, or we call it non-revenue water. And we track that in our annual rate reports. So the 2022 water rate report has a section and a discussion about non-revenue water.
So is that a benchmark with other communities and stuff like that?
It can be. There's, some challenge of that is that, we're an all retail system. So we're not going across, we don't meter across all the different differentiations. So we don't track some of this stuff. There's also what we call slow meters or meter loss. So there's some, your measurement isn't quite there as precise as a system that's got a production separate from distribution, like a wholesale system. And John's got some experience with some of those systems. Another thing that, to consider is that, when we do backwashes, when we flush hydrants, when we're doing twice a year hydrant flushing, we also do a tremendous amount of flushing in response to water quality concerns. We're all iron groundwater system. So there's a lot of water that we're purposefully pushing out of the system from a maintenance standpoint, but it's going into the bucket of non-revenue water. So, at some point, these could be kind of inverted goals, if you will. So the more maintenance we do and the more flushing we're doing to get after water quality, the more our non-revenue water is going to go up.
Yeah, every community has something similar.
Yeah.
What would you guess that might be percentage-wise?
I'd say we're probably around 15%. I'm getting numbers mixed up because in wastewater, we also have non-revenue water from I&I, and we're pushing 20%. We had a pretty big jump from, we were tracking at 10% for a long time. So I'm getting, I'm getting the two reports somewhat cross my mind, but I believe that we're around 15%.
Just one question on this is the wellhead protection, the townships, some have it, some don't. The townships have to do it for the contract, but we were sort of waiting for the city. You're in the process of revamping your wellhead protection program. You're going to sort of piggyback off that, so there's some sort of consistency. Do you have an idea where you're at in that process?
I'll check. I know staff is working on that. We've made some progress on that. And I think there's just a few more things we're waiting on from Eagle, because there's also some relation back to stormwater. Some of these stream flow protections and some of this stuff too. So, and we're in a renewal process right now on our MS4. So they're kind of connected with that one. So.
Thanks.
Sorry, one more, speaking of protection. So what do we, how do we protect against terrorist attacks? Whether at the, on the tower or our communications.
So you did a risk and resiliency study, right?
Correct. So, given the size of our system, we were required to participate with EPA and Homeland Security risk assessment. So we perform risk assessments on, what are some vulnerabilities to our system to include that. We also just participated with a very in-depth study with an inspection with Eagle and EPA, an on-site inspection in June. That's a sanitary survey, and really it's focused on preventing water quality concerns. And so there was a number of deficiencies noted that we'll be working to correct.
That doesn't come to us though, right?
No, it doesn't come to you unless you.
It's an expense to the water system.
Correct, unless you want to see it. I mean,
I don't know.
there's kind of, by the contract, you could see anything that has a rate impact, which is every single thing we do has rate impact. So there's really, if you're interested in that, and there's our EPA inspection, which was also coordinated with Eagle under a sanitary inspection. Terrorist wasn't the number one. Wasn't the goal of that, but there's it kind of wraps into that because we do get into protection of well fields and some of that kind of stuff. That we can provide you some documents on where we're at. Those would be.
We don't have fences around all our towers, do we?
No, well, and then so in this discussion too, the system, the city, the townships together, we've had a very open policy on a lot of this stuff. If you look at how Al Sabo and how Station 25 that's in Comstock, how these were developed and how they're implemented, we almost have park-like amenities that were kind of designed around these things. So most all of our resources that you're talking about are accessible by the public. If we were to make a major change in our direction with that, sure, there's cost implications, but beside that, if we closed Al Sabo to the public, we closed Fred McClendon to the public, Central downtown, if that was fenced off with razor wire, that's a whole different image and we have not gone in that direction.
And in contrast, having certain things accessible means they're visible. And that means they're under surveillance because people would see something that doesn't look right, they will report it. And just fencing something off, fence is the easiest thing for anybody with intent to bypass. So, in some ways, having the visibility is a wise decision. Yeah.
Cameras too, but it's usually history.
That's interesting topics today. Is there anything else for the good of the order today? It sounds like you're talking about the agenda items. Primarily, we'll be looking at these responses to the RFQ at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
I had one other item,
Okay.
sir. At the last meeting, I said I'd bring to you like a conflict of interest statement. So I've looked at a few, and I will bring this back in 2 meetings. Just a concept for you that way everyone's aware when I'm voting, I shouldn't be voting to pay myself perhaps. Or whatever that might be.
Seems like I have one on every committee.
Yeah.
So, even every city committee.
They have a conflict of interest statement or document or? Jim? Are you saying that the city does that on every committee?
I have one on my brownfield, I'm pretty sure.
If you could share that, that'd be great. Thanks.
It's not every committee, so probably depends on
But just
the
to,
scope
just
of
to
how
see
people
it
are
might
involved.
be
Some are
helpful.
purely advisory and some you're voting more on.
Yeah,
Projects and
brownfield, they have a lot of
spending.
professionals on that.
Yeah.
And people are not voting on their projects, but their projects are coming
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, but we should definitely have one that everybody has.
Discussion.
Anything else?
I've shared the request in the past. I want to bring it up again. I think with the agendas that are coming in front of us today, we're scrambling, looking at when's the May meeting, the June meeting, the July meeting on calendar. It would be nice at least if we had published on the agenda the next meeting date.
Can you add the meeting date for the next meeting to the
To
agenda?
the agendas
Yeah.
at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think that's missing, and it would be great for us to have it. That was all I had. Thanks.
Anything? Gentlemen, good with the order here?
Well, there's been lots of interesting topics today.
Yes.
If I could, one more, Mr. Green, I guess, favor. You hear a lot about the COVID sampling and wastewater. Is the city involved in that at all, or is it something that goes on regularly for all kinds of stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, the city of Kalamazoo, in partnership with our local, our Kalamazoo County Health Department, entered into agreement with Hope College for continuous real-time COVID monitoring within the sewer system, mainly the interceptor system, so that we can get information out to health professionals in our area. So it's not broken out by neighborhood per se, but we've got the sampling broken out by southwest lower, Portage, east, which would be like kind of Comstock, Gull Lake, Ross, Richland area, kind of north, and then core city areas, and all that information is going kind of real time to state and local health department. It's sampled. There's students from Hope College that we've trained on, where to access these manholes. We spent a lot of time with them, and we've got them now to where they're just out doing it themselves. But they've got samplers like those ISCO samplers that are running, monitoring, and they're pulling those weekly and bringing those out and providing data to it. So it's been a great partnership, and I think it's helped our health department. I'd say I can't really comment on what their opinion of it is, and I know they're using it, so it's been a good partnership. Yep.
So, all right. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
It was helpful having you here, James.
Yeah, no,